So I just mentioned the communication guidelines over there, and that's okay with everybody else. So if not, then we'll introduce people, and Lou, would you start?
Yeah, Lou Sitzer, past director of NCTV for 5 years, and present producer of Occupy Nevada County TV, a weekly show that Eric Tolman and I have been doing lately out of his living room. And we're awaiting patiently a studio, but it's working in the meantime.
Paul Champagne, board member and treasurer.
Cheryl Rubin, I'm a board member.
Jay Kusa, board member on leave, currently acting chief engineer.
Emma Santa, interim executive director.
Scott Lethbridge, I'm a new member.
Right. Allison Lehman, I wasn't here at the last meeting, so nice to meet you. I haven't met before. And I'm a board member.
And Dominguez?
My name is András Maros. I'm a new member here, new producer.
Wynn Rogers, I'm Susan's husband. Gil Dominguez, member.
Pam Bryan, not yet a member, but just moved here from Cody, Wyoming 6 months ago, and just interested in seeing what's going on with NCTV.
Carolyn Ivy Cohn, program scheduler for NCTV Channel 11, member, producer.
Terry Hicklin, staff, long-term member and producer.
Craig Worson, producer. Adam Heilgren, producer and gadfly.
Susan Rogers, board chair.
And Randy.
Oh, yes.
Randy Hansen, the guy behind the camera. Randy. Hand me the camera.
Get him on film.
Okay, Randy. Introduce yourself.
Oh,
Randy Hansen, member.
I forgot to add something to my credential. I'm a
Okay.
member.
All the directors are members. Okay.
Oh, and then we got a latecomer.
Oh, welcome. Tell us your name, Linda.
The Reverend.
Okay, so thank you for that. Just to start off, I want to say there's been some idea among some people that we weren't going to recreate what we had before, and none of us know where that came from, but the studio is definitely going to be rebuilt, and there's no plan to cut back on any of the types of things that we were offering in the zone. And we're working to assure as much access as we can to the facility, which many of you probably know is just different because we're sublessees of Grass Valley. And they lease from the building owner. They don't even own the building over there. They lease. We are sublessees of Grass Valley. And I'm thinking, I mean, maybe you, Emma, you can confirm this, the access even seems to be a little more problematic than we had expected. Did you say that?
Sure, I actually have it in my update.
So Emma will talk about it. We sent out the written thing that I think most of you have seen. I brought a few, I brought 5 extra copies here. I'm going to keep one for myself. So I still have 5 extra copies if anybody wants to see it. Does anybody have any questions or comments or feedback on the written item or things that you think need further clarification?
Did you all get it? It was sent as
It was an attachment to an email.
Email to members. Response to last time's meeting.
I'll give shy people a few minutes to. So people are kind of leafing through it, see if you can see anything.
The one thing about the generous donation and best practices, and could you explain that a little more? If someone's offering you a bunch of money, why you can't take it?
We adopted this gift policy last year because the IRS requires you to have a gift policy when you incorporate. So we adopted this one last June, I guess. And basically it represents a good way to run a business or a nonprofit as a form of a business. So Section 2, restriction on gifts. Media Center will accept unrestricted gifts and gifts for specific programs and purposes, provided that such gifts are not inconsistent with its stated mission, purposes, and priorities. Media Center may not accept gifts that are too restrictive in purpose. Gifts that are too restrictive are those that violate the charitable trust of the media center, gifts that are accompanied by an improper economic benefit to the donor, such as a gift that's conditioned on a commercial preference to the donor or affiliated company, or gifts that vest the donor with an inappropriate, or gifts that vest the donor with inappropriate control, such as a gift that requires the media center to hire a specific person or take some other unacceptable action. All final decisions on the restricted nature of a gift and its acceptance shall be made by the board. I mean, in general, I think you could identify that with the company that you own or the company that you work for, if somebody offered them money and put a restriction on it, most business people would say, gee, that's not good business practice to be bound to something that has a real conditional restriction on it. And so that's why it's in the policies, because it's not really good business practice. And it is in the policy that we adopted.
Yeah, just to add on, of course, we're thankful for any generous gifts and donations, and are seeking them in the community, and are eager to get as many as we can. It's just when it's tied to a personnel kind of a matter, it's not really an appropriate connection with the policy. So we appreciate the generosity of anybody who wants to pitch in and help out financially.
In theory, without having a specific example, again, the policy says we will accept unrestricted gifts and gifts for specific programs and purposes, provided that they're not inconsistent with our stated mission, purposes, and priorities. So I guess hypothetically the answer might be if somebody had a gift and they wanted it to be used in a certain way, and that was a way that that was consistent with what we wanted to do anyway. Yeah, like if somebody said, I'll give you $50,000 to hire somebody to work only with all of the schools, the K-12 schools in the area to teach, we'd say, oh, thank you so much, let us kiss your feet, you know, or something. You know? Yeah, it's just, again, gifts that vest the donor with inappropriate control, and then the example that just happened to be in the policy was hiring somebody. I mean, most businesses, whether they're run by an individual or a board, it's not appropriate to give away that kind of.
Well, sometimes, I've had various experiences, sometimes if somebody gives a gift but puts a condition on it, that can no longer be a tax-free donation, because it's not an open donation. It's saying, I'll do this I'll give you a scholarship fund, but it's got to go to so-and-so. You know, that's not a tax-free donation because you put a condition on it.
In other words, you only do those in coffee shops. Right?
So that was Craig's question. Did anybody else have any?
Yeah, it seems to me that I'm really new, so I don't know a lot of the stuff. I know a little bit of history. But I think one of the biggest questions were from the producers was about raising funds and whose responsibility is that. And I don't know. It's a blurry answer that I've had in my head. It's still not. I think I mean the things that I've known about boards is that is definitely the board's responsibility to raise funds.
We know we have a responsibility to raise funds, and we work with the ED to do that. So it's kind of a shared responsibility. It's not just ours, but we are definitely, that's what boards do.
Well, working with an ED and sharing responsibility is a very gray area. What does that mean? I mean,
may I answer?
Yeah.
One of the things that came up was underwriting and looking at underwriting, and there's a component that involves staff hours and recording the PSA. There's a follow through. There's the thank you letters. There's a lot of staff hours that would go along with that are not necessarily board oriented. So what we've been doing and working together is developing what do we as staff and as the people who have to fulfill their part of the underwriting contract have to do. And then I go back to the board and I say, this is what we'll be able to do. These are the things that we need. Can you go out and help find the donors? And in that way, we're working back and forth. So that's how that's really working.
When Paul was here, he kind of carried the vision of what we were going to be in terms of a media center. So he was the primary person who would make a visit, and I went with him on one visit, and I don't know if some of our people went with him on other visits to see underwriters, because he was the best one at articulating what a digital media community center was going to be. So he, you know, we all know that. He was just wonderful at getting people excited about the vision.
Yeah, a little bit of history on Josh. When the superintendent of schools essentially underwrote the station as it was developed at the Armory, and I became the executive director, I felt it was my responsibility to go raise money. And I would do the asking of underwriters and would raise between $25,000 and $35,000 a year. That's 25 to 35 underwriters a year. And I happen to have lived in the community 35 years. I knew a lot of people, a lot of friends, businesses. And so going to ask friends and businesses to do the, you know, it was not, you know, it's never easy to ask for money, but it was something that I was very willing and in fact had to do in order to provide the additional funding. Essentially what, even though it didn't come down to it, I felt as if I was raising my own salary, even though I didn't present it as that, and it never went into my pocket. It went to the station, but the station needed that $25,000 to $35,000. And then when I left in the process, I trained Michael DeMarco. But throughout that 5 years, you know, we tried every conceivable way to raise money, hiring someone to go and do it, paying them a commission, going with some board members to train board members to do the asking for underwriting. Lots of producers would devote their time and energy to this 30-second to 60-second video piece, which was provided to the underwriters as an inducement. Not only would we put it on TV, we would offer it to them for their website. It was a deal to get a custom 30-second to 60-second video piece made for their business that thanked them on TV 300 to 400 times a year. You know, prime time spots. I mean, it was all part of a presentation that was transferred, in my eyes, to the ED because I assumed that responsibility when I first took the job.
Was that like the first time were you like setting that new trend or creating this new quote-unquote policy? Or
you know, Terry can give you the history prior, as Susan and others can. You know, prior to the superintendent of schools taking over the TV station, it was run on a minimal budget, $5,000, and you know, it was a minimal operation. And when you know we took it over, we being the superintendent of schools, they also provided $40,000 a year to help run the TV station because it's PEG, you know, public access education government. So education was a very large component of the television programming. At least we tried to do as much as we could in terms of education. So they helped to underwrite and provide funds, $40,000 a year. Well, that diminished and is gone. I mean, basically, that was Terry McIntyre's contribution to see that educational programming happened and that the schools were promoted and what was happening in the schools was promoted. So, you know, again, so we're absent the $40,000 from the superintendent of schools. We're absent the $25,000 to $35,000 in underwriting that has kind of dissipated over the years.
So you were like the premier right after it was called FCAT, right?
Right. It was called FCAT before NCTV.
And then, so this is the time when it became NCTV?
Correct.
Was there any other policy change around is there actually a policy about how the funds are gathered?
I don't think there's a formal policy.
I just wanted.
Is that like part of the bylaws or something?
No, but I know this term best practices gets on people's nerves a little bit. But the fact is that the models that are out there for foundations and for fundraising, and I think one of our colleagues at the last meeting mentioned this as well, the executive director, in a way, they need to eat, sleep, drink, that kind of thing in their mind, and work closely and ask for help and help steer the board in where are the opportunities and collaborate. But I found that from my experience with nonprofits and foundations that the person in charge is the president or executive director. I think it takes that responsibility, that pride and responsibility to making it happen with his colleagues or her colleagues.
It is the executive director job description in the policy handbook.
Oh, it is.
What is, how's it worded there?
I have no idea off the top of my head, but you're more than welcome to stop by and take a look.
Well, the reason that this is like really, I think, a crucial question is because why we are all gathered here is because evidently there have been some problems that have created a difficult situation for, all the reasons. But I think part of that has been, I don't know the specifics, but it just, from the differing viewpoints about Paul and about the board, I'm new, so I really don't know the politics, that the separation of responsibility and how the control and why these boards are set up on the executive and all of that is so that it really remains a public place and not for anybody's benefit, whether they donate or not. That somehow over there is what needs to be examined. Like, for instance, I'm curious, how is the board elected? How is the board elected? Any board member?
When the corporation was formed, and this was in some of what, did you get a chance to read this? Because I can give you this while I also talk about it, because that's the last, it's on the very last page.
Yeah, I did get that.
I did get one.
Oh, hi. That's okay. When the corporation was formed, most of the people who had joined the PIF board to be part of the NCTV board came over to the new Media Center board. And those names were filed with, Paul was involved in all those discussions as to who these people were. And it was Paul and me and Jay and Allison and Christine Kelly and Judy Nielsen and James McCammon, and I think he's Stan Lathrop. And so those were the initial...
But it's the board that votes on the members? Not the members. The members don't elect the board?
Correct, because it was set up as a non-membership corporation, which is what most nonprofits are. But in corporate language, there's a membership corporation. Does anybody here remember the Sierra Club? Yeah. Once a year you get a ballot in the mail and you vote on who the board of directors of the Sierra Club is. But if you're, example, for a member of Circle here in town, you will know that you never get asked to vote on members of the board of Circle because they're a non-membership corporation. So is KDMR. And they have what I think is called a self-sustaining board. And when a board member's term expires, we set up the original terms with either 1, 2, or 3 years, so that after the end of the 3 years, you only have a third of the board turning over. And you don't have a mass exodus and trying to get new people on all at once. You have a rotating kind of like that. And when people's terms expire, they can either offer themselves to be reelected, or we look for new people to take their seat. And there's a process that we go through in terms of talking with them, having a meeting to find out what their interests and skills are. Are they willing to help raise money? What do we need in terms of contacts in the community? Do they maybe represent education or business or some area where we feel like we could use their contacts? And if it seems like a good fit and they have the time and they're willing and we feel like they'd be a good person who could be collaborative and work with us, then they would be invited. They would come to a board meeting and observe and listen, and we would have a chance to meet them. And then at the next board meeting, we would vote to accept them.
During this whole process, the members had no input?
Correct.
No.
Yeah, and I think that that's actually really been brought up as an important point, that right now we have 4 or 5 slots on the board, and the board talked today about how we're going to move forward to fill those slots. And the thought was immediately fill a couple of slots with producers so they have a voice on new board members. Because as a board member, and I was asked to join, Paul wanted me to represent Department of Social Services as well as Workforce Investment. And they interviewed me and been on the board, gosh, for close to 2 years now. And I don't think I had any interaction with producers, or producers came to the meetings. And I recognize that as being a huge, huge void. Now, mind you, probably the difficult way I found out was a huge void. But I think there's a strong, strong interest to get producers on the board so they could help have a voice of who comes on after that.
Yep.
And we might just ask ourselves the question, as it's set up right now, is that way of doing things the best way that it serves our group? Because every group is different. The Sierra Club, Circle, everyone has their own entities, and I think that one of the frustrations might be that there's no responsibility as a board member to any person other than your own personal integrity that you're bringing to the board. But in terms of the membership, there might need to be look at some procedure where there are an election or at least a process of removal from a board if the membership doesn't like what's going on. Because right now, if the membership doesn't like what's going on, there's not many recourses.
Well, and I would have to say it would typically be the executive director's responsibility or any member of the staff to let us know if there's issues. The group ran fine, you know, when Lou was executive director as this type of PIEF. The previous corporation.
But we weren't PIEF right away. We were there was a heavy-handed governmental board immediately on the station when we transferred from FCAT to NCTV.
Oh, right.
There was 2 city councilmen from Nevada City, 2 city councilmen from Grass Valley, one. Well, Lou's one from each, right? Lou has more of the breakdown, but still, that's not. And that's because we were in transition. I mean, make no doubt about it, the move that Terry McAteer made greatly enhanced the position of the station in the community. It gave us instant credibility because before that we were ragtag muffins that were doing good things and had a passion for television, which is really at the core of why anybody produces anything. You know, you have to have a passion to do it, to sit there and edit it or shoot it or whatever. So, but that gave us credibility, and then from there the board transferred, and things were going well because there was very little interreaction. It was all being set up, the station was being built, there was changes. There was people that didn't make that transition from FCAT to NCTV just because it was too different. It was too structured. It wasn't the regular, you know, easygoing way that it was before. So this is another transition. So when now you go to PIEF, and now you go to our board, and now we've come out of that. It's like a big birthing cycle. And we're on the other side, and we're finally ourselves, which was the promised land, right, Lou? Back when it started, that we would one day be our own entity. This is it. Okay, so we finally come out of it.
So, I just want to clarify, it always was PIEF when Terry McAteer took it over. Terry was president of the board of PIEF, as well as being superintendent.
What is PIEF? Excuse me.
Public Education Enrichment Fund, a nonprofit that it kind of did projects and accepted money.
It was his shell corporation that he could shove projects in and give them a board, and you know, very smart, you know, idea.
Venture capital.
Yeah, exactly.
So when Terry said, "I'm taking over the TV station," people assumed that he, as superintendent of schools, was taking over the TV station, when he was really putting it in letting the corporation Peach run it, of which he happened to be president of the board. And most people didn't know because it kind of didn't really matter. It was a very odd relationship, but
you know, and I just, some of the comments that I hear, like some of what you guys have been making, in hindsight now, this many years later, people are saying, well, wait a minute, what's PEEF? You know, what does that mean? I've explained that, you know, what it stands for a million times, but there, I think some of the disconnect happened, especially for old timers, when we came out of FCAT, and we had a voted in board, and we were under the Brown Act. And so these are all the kind of catchphrases that everybody's, you know, tuned into now because the spotlight's been shown, or whatever you want to say. But so now people are asking, well, wait a minute, when did this change? Well, let's see, that was 2004, and this is 2012. So a few years have gone by. But, you know, sometimes it takes, you know, upheaval to get people to kind of clue in. So now we're getting all the questions. And that is what people want to know, is like, wait a minute, we had a voting membership, and now we don't, but they never told us that. So what happened? Why weren't we ever updated on the fact that we don't have a voting membership? Like there was nothing put out to people.
I think a voting membership is an informed membership. It's also an active membership, although it might not have the same mindset as other people or whatever, but you know, that's what really makes it interesting, is the different schools of thought.
Well, if it's not a voting membership, if it's a membership that the board members elect the other board members, then it's basically a private club. And it's not a, you know, it's a little too much closed control. And,
you know, a couple questions came up from me that I just have to ask, first of all. And that was when you were mentioning, you know, going back, way back to FCAT. I mean, since before there was any money was really in there. I would like to know and have a little bit more accountability about the financial situation and the funds. Because it seems like we got to a critical hour where all of a sudden we didn't have any funds, or at least that was described, that we didn't have any funds.
Do you mean recently?
Just recently. Is this true? You know, and you're talking today about how money is going to be coming in. Do we not have enough funds to be running our public access television station?
We do have enough funds to run the public access station.
Okay. And one of the other things that I really want to make sure that we really understand is that the reason why Terry McIntyre's, I think, program didn't quite work with the education program is because we are pay. We're not part of the education. We're not part of the government. We are part of the public. And part of the public, in the old bylaws, meant that we allowed the public to be able to come in, have a studio that they could walk into at any time. 20 years ago, when I came in, I was able to walk in. I didn't have to have ID. I could just walk into the station. There were hours, and we could show up, and voila, you could be introduced. Now that we've grown, and we now have income, and we now have staff, it seems like we need to be increasing the staff, and that we have excess income that we can be doing that, because as we're able to do that, we'll be able to generate more funds to be self-sustaining, because we can still be a non-profit, but we can also be self-sustaining. And I know that there's a real problem about being public access, because what I want to also make sure that everybody understands is that it's like gold fever. What happens is that everybody can have their tape submitted. Everybody has equal time and viewing time, and that we should be giving a priority to our local community tapes, public access, because that is building our public community here. And we need to be doing more outreach in that regards to make it really a strong thing. And I think one of the things that Paul Minicucci had that was really good, and that could have been a template, was once we do create that foundation within our community, then we can reach out to other public accesses, other places, and we can say, here, we have our stuff together, this is what we want to share with you, and blah, 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 and share our programming that way. But I really think that I would really like to see emphasis here on public access, both location, you know, hours, and I would like to see a staff increased where we can, and there's so many ways that we can make extra money other than just underwriting and fundraising, which there are lots of ways we can do wonderful fundraising. I mean, look what Circle does. I mean, we have shown up at every place and videotaped everybody at every location here. Get one of these places to give us a free night and a free location, and we have a party. And we submit tickets, and we get the musicians that we have videotaped to come and do a concert. I mean, we could bring in big dollars. I mean, we just have to think a little bit larger, and that will be engaging our community at the same time. So if we can think how we can interconnect our cross purposes, you know, so everybody, it's a win-win situation, and incentives. You know, I mean, I know like Gil does, you know, he brings in and he makes a living, you know, videotaping the sports channels. These are really important things because we like that, because it's local, the families like it, they plug in, they know that there's hours. We like to give that to him. He's supporting a family. He brings in underwriters. He keeps some of that for himself, but he's bringing in some of his stuff. Some of us, you know, Lou Meyer, when he was doing his program, he wasn't able to, he's not a salesman, he wasn't able to go out there and get underwriters, but he was doing a really great programs, bringing in lots of different kinds of people that were doing interesting things that were connecting our community. So maybe then we get our board of directors and our ED, now that you're saying that he's a fundraiser, to go out and fundraise for those programs like Reality Check that doesn't have underwriters. So it's not the producer to create the underwriter, because the producer, if they gift you with an underwriter, fine, gratis. And they should get an incentive or some sort of feedback or payback for that. But otherwise, the producer that comes in, spend their hours, their time, their labor, their, you know, I mean, their soul, bringing in tapes, we need to help support that.
Thank you.
And when you I will be producing a program with Bill Gaynor from the poetry series. We talked about that, and we already know what we want to do. And so when the studio is up and coming, you know, we would like some help, and I'll put a staff together and whatever. But you know, I mean, that's where we also need our staff there to help the producer that wants to put on their program, get it together so that they can do that, so they can function on their own after they've had that initial introduction, and they can sign up for their time to do their program. So that's the other thing.
Lou, we talked about fund development, and we talked about underwriting a lot, and you mentioned the money that Terry had first put up, the seed money or whatever. But could you explain to people a little bit about the franchise money?
Oh, you mean the cable companies? Yeah. It's complicated.
So I wanted you to do it instead of me.
Sure. Okay. Boy, it's just hard enough getting the bookkeepers to understand it. Basically, the cable companies donate a certain amount of money to the cities and the county for the access to cable. That's an old cable law in the 60s. So that that money goes into their general funds.
The city and the counties.
City and the counties. Now, it would be nice if it went to us, because in fact, you know, we are the ones who are using the cables for public and educational governmental purposes. But the cities and counties decide what they want to do with their with money in the general fund, and it's been I think the same amount. I can't remember exactly. It's in the realm of $30,000 from Grass Valley and about $7,500 from Nevada City, and I can't exactly remember what the county kicks in. But you know, that's one lump sum that can be used for operations. You know, and maybe it comes to $60,000 a year or something like that. That's operations. That's one chunk, which comes in quarterly but in fact is always 3 months late after the end of the quarter, so it's like the station is always waiting for these checks to come in from the cities and county. Then the cable companies also, this is a 10-year contract. The cable companies also agreed to every other year pay a certain amount of money directly to the station for capital expenditures. These are restricted funds that can only be used for equipment purposes. So in fact, and in fact, it's a major constraint, because it'd be wonderful if we could use that funds to pay salaries, because that's always been the stretch. How do we pay salaries? And in fact, that's why underwriting came about. And the other thing that developed during my tenure was the operation of the government station, Channel 17. We also linked up with South County Sudden Link, which connects to trucking. So we were able to produce government station programming, Channel 17, and it actually put a huge load on our staff, because there was actually very little money involved in that. So I negotiated with I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. Not Rick Havey, but the CIO.
Steve Monahan?
Steve Monahan. We negotiated a certain amount of money so that we could pay and set up. We purchased the equipment through the cities to set up little stations at Nevada City, Grass Valley, and the county, and hired folks to actually work those stations, to transmit back to the core and put Channel 17 on the air. And so actually the contracts with the government became over time a real stability, because we were paid first for council meetings, supervisors meetings, eventually planning committee meetings. And each of those meetings were revenue not only to pay the people operating, like Lynn, and others operating, but it also created revenue for the station. Created some
How
working
much do we
money.
make on the government? I'm just curious.
I don't have those.
It's about
figures.
$1,200 a month.
On the taping, it varies anywhere between $1,200 a month to maybe $2,000 a month gross, and then we have to pay the videographers out of that. And then
So
everything
that
on
wasn't
there.
what you netted then?
No.
Because the other question too, and which is, actually it's really great that you mentioned this, is that one of the ways that we can, and producers can help, for example, when I do the poetry series, these people, they love, there's like animals, they love to see themselves. And they do, and they're always, tackling me as I'm walking out, get a copy of this or whatever, and Bill Gaynor, sort of makes his shield and say, I'm doing the editing and we'll get one to you. We could get, when our edited tapes are coming on, I can say, hey, call NCTV, duplication fee, then you get it. So there are ways that, sometimes people don't want to, maybe that's their bread and butter, or they make the tape themselves. So, if I was making myself, I'm not going to give it to you. But if you are burning the tape and you're showing that, then, hey, that could be excess money. So when we fill out our little forms, musicians, or times when I do like the hospitality house or something like this, an event, people might want copies. That's another one of those kind of things. And so when that is done, that can be done with the inventory, announced even ahead of time. If you're looking for copies for the, tonight's performance, you can check NCTV, they will be done, and blah, blah, blah. And so, so when that is, so those are ways also, too, that we haven't thought of, that could be helpful.
Yeah.
I just wanted to connect something you said with what Lou said. Remember the $40,000 from the superintendent of the schools office? That was personnel money. And so when that put special pressure on having the staffing that you pointed out the staffing is really stretched. Well, there was $40,000 that's not there now, and that's a big nut to crack.
They pretty much paid Bill Carlquist's salary.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
which is why we've had a little, engineering has been kind of stressful since we've been.
And I did go out I spent, a week, thank you, Lou, under Michael and Marka, and with Michael Lynch, going out. And actually, I'll tell you, it wasn't as stressful as you think. I mean, it's like you really need a buddy because you need to keep up a little bit of energy. And I wouldn't suggest going to too many places at once because you're going to hear no. And you ask for the membership or or their individual membership, if not their business membership. But a lot of times what happens is you really connect them to this. And you can also, what he was mentioning earlier, those little, 30-minute second blurbs are so valuable. My selling point, which I actually had a couple people wanted me to come back later to do that. One was a real estate company, one was a new business. Because what they saw was this was something they could put on their little website. So what we can tailor that in some ways where we're giving them a thank you for, being a member of NCTV, but we're showing their business. It shows they're community minded. This is a very nice link for their business. So that's a real selling point. And I must say, though, board members, they really don't like to see me. They like big stuff because they like the important people out there as sales, So the EDs and whatever. I was charming just because I like to do sales and so on. But otherwise.
Linda?
Yeah, I was wondering how many business memberships there are with NCTV and how many individual memberships comprise NCTV at this point?
Our staff would know something like that.
Well, if staff was prepared for that question, I could give you the answer to that. We don't have very many. I would estimate that probably right now we probably have around maybe 165 members. Of organizational members, very few. I doubt if it's 40.
Because
When we did the telethon, when we, in, I don't know, 3 or 4 years we did it, one of the inducements for the nonprofits to come on and raise money for themselves, and Gil knows this, we struggled, it was a great adventure. 12 hours of live TV.
That's euphemistic.
Yeah, but every nonprofit had to become a member of the TV station. So we had 30 nonprofits. So every telethon we did, we raised a minimum of $3,000. So, things like that, and we make it, to the advantage of the nonprofit. They raise money for themselves, but they're also helping us.
Well, it seems to me that, $35 for an individual membership per year is a minute amount for the privilege of submitting all that we do. And I would just suggest that we consider a larger investment for the individual and a larger investment for the corporation or the business person. Let's invest ourselves in this more in one way to be supportive of, NCTV. I'm certainly would be for that. I don't think $100 minimum for an individual, membership would be out of line in any way. You can't buy a 2x2 ad in the newspaper for $90 to run once.
Can I address that?
Yeah.
Okay. This is a point that probably, and what you're saying is very valid. It would be great if people wanted to give us more. But I need to point out the public access element of public access television and the Digital Media Center. We cannot insist that people pay that kind of money to submit programming. We must accept programming from anybody, whether they're broke and don't have a dime. Because if we start only accepting programming from people who have money, we're no longer public. I just wanted to make that clear so that everybody understands that.
You make a donation.
You can do
so I just
anything
suggest that you go into your heart because you feel that way, and you put your own $100 up there and say, "This is my donation." This is my membership and this is my donation. And that's what we do, because many of us do that anyway, just by the time and effort that we put into a piece.
It was my understanding the membership fee was to utilize the equipment and be trained on it, then you had to be certified.
And
So that's where the
That's why we
membership
want
came
access.
into, you know, you can't have people just walking in off the street and
Yeah.
sitting there in front of the switcher and say, action!
That's why you also need a staff, you know, of people so that they can train, and we have that available, and so that we can't, so that they can monitor the equipment and things like that. And yes, there's just so much more that we can do, and there are holidays. You know, I mean, one of the outreaches that we can do with the schools.
Adele, I'm going to want to make sure Randy's had some things to say, and I want to make sure Randy gets a chance to talk.
Oh, I just wanted to ask, a long time ago, we used to have an agreement that all the producers that had individual underwriters, that we all gave 10% of what we get to the station. And I know that in FCAT days, and I'm pretty sure I thought at the beginning of NCTV days, that was written on some kind of paperwork, but I have never seen it in the last couple of years of stuff. So I'm just wondering, is that still a policy that's thought about, or is that just not there anymore?
It's in the
I'm
policy.
not aware of a written policy.
Randy?
I never saw it in the policy.
It's in my office, because I've recently read all of the policies. It's in there.
It is in there?
Yes.
But we don't really have a way of monitoring that. We never did monitor it. It was an honor system, right?
And one of the things that you have to remember, too, is that we have a very hard thing. I remember by the old bylaws, but of course I remember the old stuff, is that we used to always get in trouble about whether or not individuals are making money off of the station, because it is public access. So, you know, I mean, I remember Bucky, everybody remembers him.
Yeah.
You know,
We just can't go there. I was.
I know.
So we have no
So-
way of
so I-
knowing, and we shouldn't care. I mean,
So we shouldn't care.
There's no way of monitoring that.
Right, exactly. So I feel like the people that are here, we don't need to really police that. I think it's something that it's. I will say that our very first meeting, I hated it when it said, let's all agree that we're allies. I didn't agree to that the first meeting because I wanted to find out information about everybody to know if I was an ally. But I think here we're all coming in as producers now. We can jump to we're all allies. So I think we could think of some checks and balances that might be helpful, or more ways to bring more income in. And
We'll
to
get
be
you
more
on a couple
supportive of the
committees,
producers.
on a couple committees a day.
I got one more question to Lou, and that's about the monies coming in on the contract of $30,000 a year. And I never understood what happened with Terry McIntyre, where there's part of that money comes in increments, and part of that money now doesn't come here. It's owed back to Terry.
Terry's not in the picture.
Well, not Terry, but the school system. So I'm wondering what happened. Is that an ongoing thing, or is that going to be like over this next year, or we aren't going to be losing part of that $30,000 back to the school district?
I'm going to let you speak to that.
Right.
We don't owe any money to them other than utilities for the armory.
Yeah, that's what we owe. That's what we owe for this current year that started last July.
So that's done then? That was something from before that they were taking money back?
Yeah, before, we owed them for rent, we owed them for utilities, and we owed them for the engineer's time. And there was a donation that the school district made to us, and every year, those three items that I just talked about were in excess of the donation that the school district made.
Oh, so then you had to pay it back.
At the end of the year, we go through an excruciating accounting process to determine exactly what it was that we owed back to them. And some years it was, $10,000, other years it was closer to $20,000.
So that's no longer going to happen?
As salaries went up, as benefits went up, we ended up having to reimburse them more money.
Yeah, now it's just utilities.
Yeah. Oh, good.
But I want to address what Linda said, and thank you very much for suggesting, because what you said points out the fact that producers and people who are using the facilities at the station and the staff support are getting a hell of a bargain for $35. And we have talked about could one of the ways that we increase the revenue coming into the station to ask more. And we pretty much decided that, like, right now, with everybody making this transition, kind of like, you know, some drama and some stuff, that this probably wasn't a good time to raise our membership fees. But we would certainly welcome anybody who feels like they have the ability to help us out more because of what they get, you know, the staff support and the facilities and the time and all of that. We would just love to see your check, yeah.
Yeah, and then the other piece of that too is revisiting membership fees is that we felt it was important to have producers on that work group to bring back recommendations because we felt that to have more of a holistic approach of just this discussion now saying that yes, on one hand it makes sense to raise it, but at the same time we want to make sure there's public access and have the different perspectives so we really have a viable document. And we are looking for volunteers to help with that work group, and it's something that we want to put in place in the next month.
It sounds like you could have it'd be great to have producers who want to be on the board, but even if they're not on the board, there could be a producer subcommittee that would hash out these issues and make recommendations to the board and have regular communication.
It is a perspective that I believe that has been lacking, that's needed, and just basic policies and procedures of how we're moving forward in fund development and programming. And you know what core programs are considered core versus programs that we want to look for one-time only funds or grants. And so those are discussions that are happening at a board level and fund development committee. And I think that the board is really aware of the value of having the different perspectives.
And a producer doesn't have to be on the board in order to have input on who's on the board because we have a board development committee. It used to be Judy and Paul and me. Right now the fund development committee is acting as the board development committee, but we could reconstitute our own board development committee and we could have a couple producers on the committee without them having to be a board member. All of our committees are open to people who aren't board members. We're interested in having non-board members because our board members are all stretched. We've got enough to do. We need more help, and for example, James is he started out on the Tech Task Force Committee, and now he's on the board, but when he's not on the board anymore, he's still going to be on the Tech Task Force Committee. And Steve Hurley is on the Tech Task Force, but he's not on the board. So the Fund Development Committee, the Marketing Committee, all of these committees have a need for people to help us out, and it's not as big a responsibility as being a board member. Randy?
Well, I'm going to have a question on when I notice it a lot of times when you guys are talking about producers on the board, you say a couple. So I'm just wondering if that means 2 or if it means that since the board can be up to 15 members, that it's possible that maybe
sure,
6 or 7 members could be on there. I mean, I like the idea of the advisory board because, a producer advisory board because most producers probably don't want to be on a board. Boards are pretty boring. So, but it's an advisory board because we don't have to go every month.
It's work, but I got to tell you people, it's work to run this station, and if you want to reap the benefits, please help us out, you know? We're pulling a lot of weight here. We are all volunteers. We are all normal people, just like you, with families and responsibilities. You want stuff to happen, we need help.
Well, we should do a marathon this year, a telethon. We should do a long telethon. A marathon telethon. You run 50 miles and then you stay on TV for 24 hours. But raise the money for the station, not for other nonprofits.
Right.
Because we need the money. So the KVMR, they do it once a year. I don't know why we don't have a big drive and do something like that. I'm working on Thursday night markets this year. Still be happy to probably maybe work something out with the station on the trying to get underwriters to do that type of thing. I'm going to do it anyway, but you know, to be able to bring monies into here, I mean, there's a possibility of being able to get some monies coming in on that. And you know, like Adele said, there's lots of people in the community that we have helped in many years of doing things here that we can pull together a ton of people to help us out. I mean, we should be able to do something at the fairgrounds. No problem. Why not? I mean, you know, I work the fair every year. I've been working out there now for 12 years. I mean, and I know a lot of, you know, there's a lot of people in the community that if we actually did it right, we could probably figure out some type of giant fundraiser once a year like that, and that would actually solve the entire problem of the what to pay for the people that work there, because obviously a core staff for that building, the way it's designed now, looks like it would probably be at least 5 people, if not 7. And the other thing that nobody really goes, we don't really talk about, is when the access for public access television is going to be down the road, whether we should be open later, like say from noon until 7 or 8 at night, and Saturdays and Sundays, or maybe even open at 2 in the afternoon until 8 instead of in the mornings, because most people that are producers, it's usually a side gig, or unless they're retired, and so they can't even go in there because they're working. So public access should be open when the people can get in there, not have this limited minute in the middle of the day that nobody can go there. So those are things that, you know, we can tell people we're open on Saturday and Sunday. In fact, that's better for us because then you don't have to be quiet walking down the hall. Nobody's there.
I don't want to pass over Gil's question. I don't want that to drop, you know, for you to feel like we didn't address that. It seemed to me that you were suggesting that maybe the corporation should be a membership type.
I'm just asking if that's the best, you know, now that it's, you know, we're looking at bylaws or whatever, what's the best way for us to do things so everybody feels involved and they have a, you know, a stake in an election certainly is one possibility. And so that's what I was just asking the group as a whole is, you know, maybe we need to re-examine that or whatever, because this is a fun group, and they like to have their input because producers are passionate people, and I just think it creates an accountability. When someone elects you, you're accountable to them. If you're appointed and you can just step aside or not be there or step down or never show up again. And I brought the analogy up last time of how many boards we have had, how many board members we've had just in the last 15 years, and yet the core membership of the group, the producer's side of it, has largely remained the same. Yeah, we've had people come and go, but so that shows you where the longevity is in the whole process.
Yeah.
You know, I think that this isn't the right time to take up a question like that.
Right.
There are big issues like getting the station up and running. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, I think that the board, as it's now constituted and will grow with producer membership, is flexible. I can see a meeting like this happening every other month. You know, I mean, the idea is the board has to do its work, and that can be boring, but it's absolutely necessary. But what's wrong with a discussion like this, which is very open-ended, you know, very collegial, and you know everybody gets input, so that I'll give you an example. Briar Patch is having an election, 10,000 members. Okay, right now, lucky if the 200 vote. So that's kind of
it's what
200.
I'll be lucky if 200.
And when it made the big change from the little store to the big store, and there was going through so much turmoil. Okay, 5,000 members, 400 voted. So, I mean, you know, when you go to a membership type, it's really a different dynamic.
I think, if I heard this correctly, Gil, your concern about the members, about the board was, where's the check and balance system? I don't mind the board being appointed. They don't have to be elected. You know, I mean, I assume that maybe you're very intelligent, or you're very capable, or you have some great connections, and this is why you're here. But if for some reason you're not working out, or, you know, like what happened with Paul, I mean, let's just use this as kind of an example. There were some slurring boundaries, some things that were some confusion for all of us, and it just got, you know, we decided we needed job description and we needed accountability from the board. And so what we need to know is that if they're, you know, I mean, you know, quote, we had a petition, we were going to, you know, wave the flag, but I think it was the main thing we were just trying to say, hey, wake up. We're interested. We want to be involved. We want you to be involved. And therefore, we want you to be accountable. So I think that's all we're asking for is how can Gil how can all of us, if some reason we feel like, hey, what's happening here? How can we make our vote in some way? Without, and you can still be appointed, but how can we checkmate you?
And I think, meetings like this are critical, but honestly, picking up the phone or, or an email or saying, these are our concerns, it doesn't even have to be formal, that there was no communication. There really was zero communication. And as a board member, as on the petition, I'm still confused in terms of where am I not being accountable? What do I need to do more? What do I need to do differently? That's still not clear. Because being on the board, I have a passion for the organization as well as I want to learn. And that was one of the reasons in my volunteer time is why I wanted to go and be part of this activity, because it was a win-win. Hopefully I had something to add, and at the same time I wanted to learn more about digital media. But when the communication broke down, I think that we all need to feel comfortable enough to call that person, maybe call a meeting like we did tonight, and just have that dialogue so we could really capture what are the issues. Because the petition, I think, was more of a symptom of things breaking down.
Yes. Exactly.
And the communication wasn't there. I think you're going to really, really have a willingness of the board to make those necessary changes, and I don't get a sense of being a member that there's someone saying, okay, I have my personal agenda and I want to move forward. It really is an inclusive process, and I think what you're hearing tonight is jump in, let us know what your priorities are, be a part of this group, and how can we move it forward together.
Yeah, well, there's just no question. It keeps coming back to the checks and balances, and as much as anybody can be objective, I'm so new here, but I have come into the center of the things, and I've heard from all sides, and not really knowing the history, or I'm sure the truth always lies somewhere in between, varies a little bit. But the point that came out is that there needs to be some sort of really change of power, so there is no power struggle, so there is no the checks and balances we're talking about. And if you were talking about 200 members showed up to vote, well, that's a lot more than just 7 people voting, right? That's still a bigger picture.
But if you
go
to that extreme, there's a lot of cost in sending out ballots.
You could do it in a way that there's a membership meeting and you vote that night, and if you don't show up to the membership meeting, so there's no postage necessary, there's no stuff like that.
We're small enough,
You're
I think
always
we
going
could
to get a minimum amount of support. I don't care what the organization is. It's the handful of people that do most of the work in any organization, and everyone likes to be part of it. So you're going to get that same thing here. Now, whether we can achieve that through dialogue, which I think we can. You should never be afraid to pick up the phone and call anybody in this room and ask a question, or just say hi, or you want to come down and join our program next week, we're doing this. And you do that enough times, and that's your checks and balances, right? It's interpersonal checks and balances.
I would just like to say that what I've seen is, and I think that there's a discussion and there's a movement to say, hey, we need to look at this and see how we can do it. It's not going to happen overnight. What is going to happen semi-overnight is there are openings for people to jump in. So far, I haven't heard of any producers who want to jump in. And if you think about it, those producers who are able to jump in and be part of the board now will help in the restructuring of the board. And that, I believe, is the first step. So if there are people who want to do that, because it's going to take a long process. I'm not even looking at it because we've got the station to get up, and that's the #1 priority. But if somebody else wants to jump in and fill that blank spot right now, they're going to be instrumental in changing the board to be what you guys want it to be. So,
Craig, what
how much time
would really help is to have an accessibility list. Everyone who's interested in giving out their name, phone number, email, address, and if they want to embellish that and put down what their talents are, what equipment they have to share, lend, rent, the times available. So we have a master list of everyone involved, including the board members, and it would help facilitate more production. People can get together and go out to businesses and shoot a 15, 30-second or a minute promotional videos. It's just finding, all the talent we have here, putting it all together. It's scattered right now.
How much time before the studio is up and running?
Well, I do have that in my report, but what happened is this week we got the Public Utilities Commission funding, we are approval, so we just got that. Very big thanks to Allison for moving that along. Caesar Comcast is coming out tomorrow. We will meet with them, we will finalize the contract, it'll take about 2 days for that. The work should be completed within a week of that, and then as soon as the last Board of Supervisors meeting is done, we cut over, we're moving in by the end of the month. So that will be up. The piece for the studio that's missing is the electrical. I don't have a quote for all the lighting systems. That'll happen on Wednesday. As soon as I have that, I can see if we can put it in, how quickly we can get it up. And that's all we're waiting for.
And then, is there going to be extra training for the producers so that they could be, working in the new studio?
I don't know if I'm
so they
jumping
can
on
do
your toes,
shows?
Jay, but what we're going to be doing, what we're going to be doing in the studio, the studio is actually going to be utilizing the TriCaster. So the first thing that we're going to be doing in the meantime, because of the way the control booth had to be set up, it's going to be the TriCaster. So the first thing is to have a great producers meeting and training on how to use the TriCaster. So it'll be a fun thing. When we get the production, the control room all set up, then that TriCaster will be available to do outside shoots for everyone. So the first step will be as soon as we get the lights in there, the stage set up, we'll do the TriCaster training, and then it'll be ready for everybody to come in and start doing it.
Is that going to be how you're going to call the studio, the TriCaster?
TriCaster.
Or is it going to be a regular studio too?
It's a regular studio. The TriCaster is the camera and editing system, right?
It's a piece of equipment. It's,
Thank you.
it's basically a studio production system in a box.
Yeah.
It's our
But what I'm saying is we're not going to have a location studio. We will just recreate our own studio.
No, we'll have the big studio will be ready to go.
Yeah. Oh, you'll have both.
Yeah, they'll have the one-man studio and we'll have the big regular black stage, lighting, everything.
All right.
The TriCaster is just the intermediate step to get something up and usable in the studio until they finally get the control room ready. And then the TriCaster will be freed up because the studio will be back to a normal kind of studio.
Some of this, myself, it was a very good question when you made a comment, like how many producers here that are really interested in being a part of the board. We did bring this up. And I think that's a very valid question, and I would like to see different people step up. I know myself, as passionate as I am right now, I'd have to check with Bill Gaynor, maybe he would like to do something like this. But I'm not able to make that commitment right now, to that extent, because I would consider, quite a bit right now for my things that are happening in my life right now. But I would, I still want to bring forward my program. I still want to do, from time to time, my programs. I'm sort of fading out, but not, just sort of sabbatical. But I think that maybe that should be answered, guys. You want to answer that? Anybody want to be on the board here? But I wouldn't mind being part of a I did like the idea of that the producers come together every couple months. Lou, I think you made that comment. And maybe have inputs.
Or have a joint meeting.
Joint meetings with, and when we have a new board member that comes on, let's call it a tea or an introduction night, let's hear them, hear their story, you guys might vote on it, but can't we have a presentation, What's a great idea. And a coming out party, and so that would be nice, and it connects everybody.
We're all volunteers, and it isn't a decision to take lightly to join the board of an organization, because you are, we all have the same passion and desire for the organization to be a success. All of us, we share that. We're all in this room together tonight. We're spending our time. So it's not a shoot from the hip kind of decision. It is a thoughtful kind of thing that we all need to go through. And I just encourage people to submit their names and think about it. If in their heart of hearts they feel that they can make a difference. We all bring different strengths to the board. I think even as you look at the current board, it's kind of an interesting dynamic of people with all different assets. And we're kind of trying to combine those strengths to make the strongest and most effective organization that we can. And that's what we hope is anybody that decides, even outside this room, in the community, when we're recruiting as broadly as we can, that people will think, what is the value I bring as an individual, and can I make the commitment? And so it's not something to just decide lightly on the spot, you know. But we are encouraging people to really think it through and get involved and submit their names and get involved in the process.
Gil, are you raising, are you just scratching your arm?
You just volunteered.
Be careful.
Don't get my vote.
All those in favor?
I would love to jump in to the board, but my wife refers to NCTV as the other woman in my life, and she will not permit it. But I am ready to jump into opportunities to help build. And one thing I would really appreciate is communication. You know, it's great getting something from Terry and Susan. You know, Emma, if you could send out, you know, like a report, or Jay, you know, when is a crew going to happen? What kind of help do you need? What nights, hours is set up? I kind of feel like we're a little bit in a vacuum, and any communication is better than no communication, and we are in the communication business.
Well, I gotta say, I feel the same way that as Lou, is the first thing to concentrate on is getting that studio together. You know, being on the board, maybe something in the future, but you know, the time I have, I want to devote to, you know, putting cables together, moving stuff, you know, knowing enough time in advance where I can get a crew, my own, and go, look guys, we're going to be doing this. This is what we want to accomplish tonight. Can I have a to-do list for that particular evening? That's what we need. You know, at least two per week in the evening.
The big holdup on a lot of that has been this Comcast piece that has finally come into spot, because we could have been waiting until the end of June to get that approval, and there's nothing that we can do without it. So having that just come in, you know, this last week, and having the electrical being there on Wednesday, that's a huge bonus, because as soon as we have those two pieces in, then we can set everything up. We're looking at starting moving the station on the 23rd.
And there is nothing that will bring us closer together than working together.
Yes.
We know the hours that we put in constructing NCTV, and you know, it was a lot of work, but you know, it was a lot of fun, and we got something done, and you know, we used it for 5 years. So we start again.
Yep. Okay.
You have to let me know what your pizza preferences
How many people
are.
I'll give you a list.
You get a whole techie group, because I'm not techie in that regard, so I don't know that I could help you. You know. And
You can cheer us on. Bring us refreshments.
That's what I was going to say. I could do that. I could bring the cheesecake or something.
Moose Brew out in the parking lot, because it's not allowed inside of it.
I think Androsh, did you have some?
Yeah, I was one of the people that put my name into the hat when we had that pre-meeting of the producers at Tones, and the conflict that I internally have created for myself was that I really believe that it should be a board member's job to raise the funds, especially now with what's going on in the world, in the country, locally, economically, and all kinds of things are happening, including the medical marijuana issue, which is enormous, gathering for the economy of this county, and all of this. So there's a lot of new things that are coming our way. We have to be open to see things in incredibly new ways. And the producers really need to focus on, like, Occupy TV. I mean, I joined that group immediately. That's what got me here, is because this is my interest, is these changes. And I think this public television station is perfect for it. And we need to contribute to the betterment of humanity and our country, and certainly even local in the county. Nothing better than television and getting on the internet and all of that. Images. So we need that. We need creative producers, and we need to have them focus on and that executive director is one person. I think there really needs to be a focus of finding people for the board who are good at raising money, or good at writing grants, or good at writing, we got to get the money in, because it's going to be a fight for money pretty soon for everybody.
It has been for the last few years.
Yeah.
So, we definitely know that, I think you all read the history of how this board was put together, and most of the people who are on the board now, it was not made an expectation for them to help raise money. We've since done a training in fundraising, and there's ways that people can help raise money without having to go out and do the ask. But we don't have, that's why we need new people on the board. You're exactly right. We are looking for people who are willing to help us go out and ask for money. We have my husband is an experienced and successful grant writer, but we need someone to help us do the research. Christine Kelly has helped us with some of that, but we could use more people to look at the grant foundation. We have access to databases to help match up grants and that sort of thing. So,
but one of the things when you're saying people don't have money, which is true at times like this, what makes people buy something? Product. People like product. So if we think that we're producing a tape product, or we're going to have a bake sale, I don't care. Product. There's ways. That's something to be thinking about. Our membership is, we have to create value for that to be a product. And we have to let them know.
The other way is to work with schools.
Yeah.
A lot of people open their checkbooks if they know you're working with young people.
And one of the things too, Halloween time. I remember way back when in NCTV, I'd go down there, I'd videotape them, and that day we'd put them on the air. And the kids would be watching it. We can make that plan ahead of time. Mill Street, the businesses like it. Ahead of time, we say, we're doing this. Everybody knows at 6 o'clock, that Halloween from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock, all those little kids that showed up, they're going to be seeing themselves on TV. The businesses, we get them to put in $100 each. There are ways we can. We need to think outside the box.
That's great, and we need the bodies to do that, because Terry and Carolyn don't have enough time in their schedule.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So producers meetings like this, they come up, we start thinking about solutions. Let's start coming together, every 2 weeks, come up with your best picks, solutions.
Well, that's how we did the first election coverage, and things like that we don't even do anymore. The station doesn't do any of that kind of stuff anymore, and it's just a shame that that we're not, because the community is.
So we're going to do election coverage. Okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm ready.
And actually,
let's do it. This is the year.
That's right. And we did running tapes back and forth with runners. It was fun. It was really good.
Have you guys been sitting in on all our meetings? Because at our staff meeting, we talked about, hey, we need to start getting people together to do the election coverage. So it's already on everybody's mind, and I actually have on here asked for people who would like to start up a committee on figuring out how we're going to do that. Also a telethon in September, not necessarily exclusively for nonprofits, but maybe just for NCTV, going out there and exploring all the different things out in the community. Again, looking for a committee to come and help us put that together as some big name PR actual.
And one thing too, all the time, and this is another big thing. We have our program, NCTV. Whatever we're called, digital media now. Adult editing classes. Come 4 weeks. Learn how to, edit, title something, Carolyn, whatever. We have lots of those things. I can't tell you how many of adult, I will go to those adult classes, as many as they have them, right, Carolyn? right?
Adult education.
Are you not saying anything today?
I'm thinking.
Okay, anyway. But, so these are things right away that we could be advertising, not advertising, excuse me, public announcements, because we can't say advertising, because we are public access. Public announcements on our public access television station, announcing classes, things like that. Inviting people in. And I'm not just talking about the kiddies, because we have adults, a lot of baby boomers, 60 to 80, that don't have a lot of, things to do and have money. Bring those in. They don't have the memory. They have to learn this thing over and over again.
May 14th is, our classroom right now is functioning as a storage room. So being able to teach classes in there is a little difficult.
It's got to come together first, and then we can move forward.
So May 14th is our date to have that classroom all cleaned out and set up. And at that point, same with the edit bays and same with the one-man studio.
Yeah,
all
Carol's
this
next
week.
because she hasn't spoken all evening, then Randy, and then Lou.
I've heard a lot of really excellent ideas around creative revenue stream in a multiplicity of ways. It takes a small group of people who can actually make the kinds of decisions and the back timing. Everything that I've heard suggested tonight, from bake sales to telethons to covering election, actually all need to be 12 months out for right now in back time pre-production with a minimum of 8 to 15 people who are completely dedicated to doing that pre-production, to figuring out the nuts and bolts on every single one of those and how they can seamlessly intermesh and support each other and synergistically create more of the same thing. It is a massive undertaking. It's worth doing, but you shouldn't be fooling yourselves that you should have started last year.
I thought we always just wing it. Where's that banner?
It is our professionalism, our creativity, our experience that has allowed us to wing and Craig.
Okay, it's like a minute to 8. Randy, want to say something?
Mine's real quick. I would just like to, one thing we didn't even touch tonight was that I know we have a PR committee, sort of, but I know that in the past, at least year I've been around, that part of the problem with the office versus the board and committees is like the PR committee and the office actually didn't even know each other. So we never had any communication. But if we still have a PR committee, I would be very interested in being involved in it and as a committee member, since I don't have to be on the board to do that. Because I think one of the most important things that this organization needs to do is be able to put NCDMC or NCTV Digital Media Center or whatever in our new logo.
Gosh, if we don't know who we are,
out
how
there.
the heck are we going to tell anybody else?
Well, they're right. I don't know exactly. It's morphine as we speak, and eventually I think it'll be.
Media Center, and we're home.
It'll be okay, and to put that out there in the community so that with PR about the organization itself. That's something that we don't do. I mean, board members could go to the KNCO luncheons. They have them every week. Tom Fitzsimmons is on there every day. KVMR has the same things. You guys should be able to try to get in.
This is going to be short.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's things that would really help us.
Okay. Who's next, and then Andrew?
I'll make it short too. I think we have to show the community that we're alive, that we exist, that we actually have a location. I think a tour, a grand opening, a visual tour on TV, that we actually show who we are, where we are, how to get there, and so we have to reestablish ourselves as an entity in the community that's viable and legitimate and, receiving donations.
A zombie walk.
We're
alive.
The union's ready to give us a really big story,
I
too.
think one way to do that, just following this advice that you were talking about, well, we are doing a product. I mean, you can do bake sales, you can do this, all kinds of things, and cover all kinds of things. But we have a product. We have an interesting product. So, and Circle has a film festival. We could have a film festival that's a lot broader We can have, I mean, what's going on in our country today with Occupy. We're creating a lot of different things that are involving the problems with our communities, with people who are getting foreclosed upon, etc. So what about if we create like a film festival, putting together an event where shows that have been produced are selected, and
We should not start big with a film festival, though, because I'm the technical director for the Circle Film Festival, and they pay me fairly well, first of all, and I have about 100 tech people under me. There's about 700 volunteers to put that festival on. It's huge, 7 venues over 3 days. So we should start a lot smaller than that, but we can still have something like that.
Well, perhaps the first year we could have, be a part of the circle, we can have a segment
But we're
for
public
the
access,
NC.
and public access means, I don't care how good your tape is or how bad your tape is, you can bring it in and you have a voice. So that's something we really have to be mindful of. So we're not a video production company, which is a great idea and a great arm, but we still have to remember that we're here serving the public need.
Also on the wild, you're talking about the Circle Film Festival. You got to remember that the Circle, we filmed the Wild and Scenic Film Festival and put it live on TV and on the internet, or not on TV, but on the internet. And we've done that a couple years, and we will continue to do that every year. So we already are involved right in the middle of that. We are the people that put it on the air. So that's, we already are doing that.
But it's an interesting idea.
On top of it.
I know what you're saying, and I think it is a good idea, but
Adam has something to say, and he hasn't spoken all evening, so I'd like to give him a chance.
Well, it's very brief. Outreach. The world today lives on the internet. Our website page is a disaster. It's totally dysfunctional. I still talk to people all the time who've never heard of NCTV. I want to refer them to our website, but I can't because they're not going to find anything useful on there.
I agree with There's a whole new website that's ready to go that we just haven't pushed out
I'm
yet.
glad that's what I was just going to say, that we really need to put a lot of attention on the website for outreach.
Once we got that one built.
Just remember
which is
how
like
many people
100
are doing the work.
Oh, I know that. I understand. If I were a better webmaster, I would volunteer to do it.
Once we got that one built, we realized that that accordion thing, no matter how cool it was taking way too much real estate on the homepage, and there needed to be more stuff going on. So the next one is better, and Emma and I are going to figure out in the next few weeks how to push it out.
Good.
I would also not underestimate social media and Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
It's something that's great.
Right now, I'm trying to gain control of our Facebook pages.
One thing that I don't know much about is that we've got cable and social media. What about the idea of putting up an HD antenna and broadcasting to the community, to anybody who wanted to receive it if they didn't have cable, who are within range?
You can go to the next tech task force meeting.
Yeah.
On Friday, 9:30, Miles.
That's a little much for this group. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I think we've accomplished a lot. Feels like a good vibe to me. Is there anybody that feels like they really feel compelled to have anything else to add? Did we get all the reports from Jay and Emma, that any more status updates?
I didn't say anything. Which is
Do you
a
have
rare
any new
thing.
piece of news? Any?
Yeah, we've made a lot of progress since the last meeting. Thanks to Craig and Gil and Michael and Wade showed up for one of the sessions. We've now got the lighting grid up in the studio.
Wow.
It needs a couple of additional support chains on it, as has been alluded to here a couple of times. I'm meeting with the electrical contractor on Wednesday. Now, there's been a lot of additional work done. There's a guy over at Grass Valley Group that basically has to approve all electrical work done on site, and the electrical work has to be done by a licensed contractor. Some of you may know him, Rick Foster. I guess he did some of the original wiring over in the...
Oh, Rick?
Yeah.
The guy with the absent of a...
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
You got it. Well, one of the things I
Great.
wanted to talk to Rick about was, when we learned that we're going to have to undo a bunch of the tenant improvements over here, I said, my God, there's an electrical panel over here with circuit breakers in it. So I took Rick over to the armory the other day. Carolyn and Terry met him, and basically got Rick to agree that we can take that panel out, move it over, and he said, well, my design for the electrical, I'm going to need a separate panel for technical power. And he says, I think I've got a panel just like this one that we could give you for technical power. So that was well in hand. The other thing that's been alluded to, and I don't want to steal Emma's thunder, seeing as how the thunder's been stolen so many times already, but the connectivity issue appears to be in the process of being solved. And I think, as I've mentioned before, connectivity consists of basically having access to the INET, which is how we get our government meetings into the building, a fiber that runs to Comcast to provide channel 11 and 17 programming to Comcast. And then there's another component, which is, we're currently, don't anybody leak this, but we're currently stealing Wi-Fi access from Grass Valley Group. We don't have an internet connection. Beep. Part of the whole connectivity issue, and this is in Comcast's camp. We're going to have very high speed, 50 megabits per second internet access over there, and that's all. The crank is being turned on that as we speak, and so I'm really happy about that. Just one other thing, Adam, and then I'll let you have the floor. I've actually got to the point now where I'm mounting equipment in the equipment racks. I'm going to start cabling very shortly. So it's still going to be a challenge to migrate the equipment from the system that is currently sitting in the armory over to GVG, but that's in process right now. Go ahead.
About access to workstations, I can produce my own shows at home, but I can't email them in because my email provider won't allow me to do that. I've recently just discovered that my Skype connection lets me send huge files very fast. Skype will let you, so I can just sit home, and if there were a Skype receiver in the station, I could submit my shows without coming into the station.
Through Skype?
Through Skype. We can also teleconference on.
You can send your DVD.
Yeah, well, the content of a half-hour, an hour-long show as a file.
Is Dropbox big?
There's also Dropbox.
Because I use Dropbox a lot.
Okay, Dropbox too, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be easy.
The enabler for anything like that is the high-speed connection that we're going to get. So.
Yeah, okay.
We can also teleconference with Skype, especially in bad winter weather where we don't want to drive around.
Yeah. Scott, did you have something else?
Oh, I just wanted to clarify that the most pressing thing at this juncture is getting the studio together. So if there's anything, I'm new here, so if there's anything I can do, we need to maybe figure out a way to get that information out and say, okay.
And that's,
I've heard this from a lot of people out there in the membership and producers who are pretty, really needing to be communicated with and have their offers to help honored. And that needs to have some kind of a system, some kind of a structure, some kind of regularity, some kind of follow-up. They're not going to keep, in fact, a lot of them had a stock offering, a lot of them have fallen off the edge, and I don't know we'll ever get them back. So that is a really important piece to this.
Aren't you on Terry's email list?
We haven't been able to do that because we didn't know at the time.
I don't have any information.
This is the first
time.
Well,
no, aren't they all in Facile? They're members.
Is that they couldn't, their hands were tied. They can't
No,
do
I
it,
was
so,
answering
yeah.
Randy. Yes, I have an email list. But if I don't have anything to send out, there's nothing to send out.
Right.
We will know for sure tomorrow after our meeting with Caesar and what exactly that date is going to be, and then we'll be able to say, okay, we need to have it done by the end of May. This is our start date. What do we have to do? These are the dates.
That's a quick question. So what's the status on tearing down the infrastructure at the armory?
I'm working on that.
We can talk about that offline too.
Well, but we need volunteers possibly. That's why I'm asking.
No, we do not need volunteers.
Bulldozer.
The Army will move it all out for free.
Yeah, use it for target practice.
Okay, so we have to pay people to do it?
No. We don't have to do anything.
No more thermite comments.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming. We'll be in touch, and we look forward to
Another meeting in 2 months?
working together.
Is that what it is? For another meeting like this?
If anyone wants to come by the station and see what's up and what we're doing now, feel free to call me and let me know, and
There was
I'll be
something
there.
that was referenced earlier in the evening, Susan said you'd be addressing, and that is member and producer access to facilities.
Correct. We need to determine the hours and the staffing hours. I think after tonight's meeting, that one of the things I want to do is send out an email that's asking for people who want to help on specific committees, because there seems to be a lot of interest, but we haven't captured that interest. So sending out something to the membership saying, these are available committees, would you be interested in serving on them? Here's another part of it. We're going to be having access at the station. Which hours and dates do you think would be the best for you? And then see where the majority of the interest falls, and then schedule accordingly. Yeah. So I think we'll be doing that this week.
I wasn't able to help out with the move because I had a broken wrist at the time, and I'm still repairing. However, so I don't know where the location is. I mean, so I need an email
And a map.
On the
and a
website.
map.
Oh, map, yes, in the
You know,
Google.
I mean, so I mean,
Should
that would be
have
helpful. So I
Still
can
can't
make
find
more
it.
helpful.
Yeah, a sign would be nice in that entryway, saying media center.
Oh, yeah, that.
I have that. Those are actually really expensive signs.
Yeah.
I have an
They
NCTV.
have to be specific to the rest of the complex.
The armory that you can just list right on.
They don't want us to use that one.
I
It
have a little
doesn't
black
meet
one.
their color
The
requirements.
property is
Very specific about that.
In fact, that lime green on the Grass Valley logo check, I was told the reason they picked that lime green is because that's the green color that the owner of that property park wanted to have everybody's color be that. So Grass Valley just said, okay, well, we'll make it our color.
Okay.
He's very picky.
I'm going for clumps of balloons that I tie on each morning when I go to work.
Before we break up, Emma, you started to say that there was going to be some more restrictions at the building, but then you never finished up with
That's
that.
what I was referring to.
Yeah. I don't know, that's what you said, I think that's what you meant, that it was going to be more difficult for people to access, and then you never
No,
came back to
it's
that.
a little bit confusing currently right now. Apparently people have been coming in the evening and asking the janitorial staff to let them in, and Grass Valley is very specific because, I guess, for corporate espionage, I should have said that all wrong. But they don't like people coming in. There are cameras on that 100% of the time, that front door that we're coming through. They're very specific about who gets logged in, who gets logged out, and who's responsible for whoever's let in that building. So if you let somebody in that building who is not supposed to be there and they go downstairs in the Grass Valley group or whatever, then you're liable as being the person who let that person in. And that was already unfortunately set into place when we moved into this, and I don't think it was fully understood by everyone, but we're stuck in it now. So the issue becomes on how we're going to have people there, when those staffing hours are going to be, when we're going to have classroom time versus when we're going to have just general edit bay time during the days or the weekends. But there will almost always have to be some type of staff member who is liable for NCTV to be on site to go ahead and facilitate that. So unfortunately, we don't want it to be as restrictive, but unfortunately we're in this very restrictive environment. So we're doing everything we can to free that up and make it available to people. So that's what's coming down. The Gold Room will be open during certain hours so that people don't have to check in all the time. They can just come in and say, I'm here for NCTV. There'll be somebody right there as they walk in who can help them. So we're looking at, with the restrictions that we've been given, how can we make it as user-friendly as possible? So working really hard and figuring that piece of the puzzle out.
Or once you've pushed the envelope as far as you can, you'll let everybody know what the rules are.
Yeah, it seems to be, when we first moved in there was some concern that we would be the training groups that are in there would be very sort of upset if they were recording or something and there were people coming in and making a lot of noise. We've had people in there moving stuff who've been fairly loud in the hallway and it hasn't created an issue.
Maybe it's the unknown too, that they don't
Right.
know yet how it's going to all be. And once they see it's not as bad as they think.
Well, and the two people that we end up really interfacing that most with was Virginia at the front desk. And she's going to be the person who's going to take sort of the brunt of the people coming in the door and where they need to go. But then the two people from training, Lou Dobbins and my dad, Mike Betts. So they're very open with saying, hey, this is going on, or I've got a class coming in, we've got this group of people, and it hasn't been an issue. I think that's been a fear, but it hasn't turned out that way so far.
Well, we also haven't had 15 to 25 people walking through the door.
No, but they've had large groups. When they go out and do their lunch breaks and stuff like that, they'll have a large group that come out from the bowels of Grass Valley Group and are milling in the hallway, and it hasn't, been an issue.